So the Mystery Babylon presentation number 9, 30th December 2025. Good evening, brethren and friends. Welcome to this presentation. And we are still introducing the concept of Babylon, the Mystery Babylon, and symbology and theology of Babylon, the second thread of messages that we have started. So we are still trying to understand the city that Cain built after murdering his brother Abel. And today we would see how this city is built to be away from God, independent of God, and uh, and it is kind of a city of revolt and city of rebellion. We would begin to see in this second presentation on this city of Cain. And when God says the city, he means not just bunch of houses put together. It's a spiritual concept. It's more of how God would look at a physical city. God would always look at the entities from a spiritual point of view, and he describes it spiritually. So now we are talking about city as a spiritual concept and spiritual construct. This is how God looks at the activities of man. And here we are seeing beginning of civilization, what we call civilization. Uh, in its proper sense. So when we say these people are more civilized than others, we are unknowingly referring to the whole thought process, the belief process, and motivational patterns. They are all included in this spiritual concept of city and civilization. So today we will go through this city of Cain and let's launch. And we are doing with the harlot in Bible. We already completed it. Right now we are doing Simeon and theology of Babylon and city of Cain. He named Enoch and city of Babel or Babel variations. So eventually we would come to beast. So city of Cain, that is the main presentation today. Genesis chapter 4, only two verses, verses 16 and 17. But these two verses are so loaded and packed with the information. So we would try to bring out as much as we can tonight. And let's launch. And this is the Mystery Babylon. It is essentially a woman and a harlot. And then she is also a Babylon, both fused together and they form the mystery. A great harlot is now fused with a great Babylon. And this is Mystery Babylon. And this woman rides on the beast and sits on it, and also sits on many waters, and then he sits on seven hills simultaneously. So this is high level essential components of this woman, and she's a killer woman. She persecutes saints, and this is a city. Babylon is a city. We are just addressing this portion now in this series of presentations. The Babylon is a city. We see it in Revelation 17 and 18. The woman which you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. And Revelation 16, verse 19, and the great city was divided into three parts. The cities of the nations fell, and the great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. So it's a bad entity, but nevertheless, it is not only Babylon, it is a city. It is called a great city, but it finds its roots and rudiments in the city of Cain. So that's why we are studying city of Cain. and we see several patterns actually here in this city. So we will first do recap of what we presented last, some of the conclusions. So Cain was the first builder of a city, or the first city. And then the story of Cain was theological. So the whole Genesis 4 is not a historian's narrative. It's not an archaeologist's uh, narrative, but it was God's narrative, how God would see at Cain and his inner motives and fears and the insecurities, what this man wants to accomplish and why he builds the city and what he intends to accomplish by building a city and naming that city after his son Enoch. So the whole narrative of Genesis 4 is from God's vantage point of view. So God's vantage point of view. Uh, but men, when they translate, then they do not necessarily um, align themselves with God's point of view. That's why the story of Cain was theological. It gives us God's view of man, not just Cain. It gives us a whole mankind as a whole is now represented in the story of Cain, in the man of Cain. It refers to attitudes, certain attitudes and activities of man. We see more and more as we develop the concept. So we kind of touched these things last presentation, and until this time, God's protection enabled life to go on. This is after Adam and Eve's fall. They were driven out of the Garden of Eden. Now they are landed at the east entrance of the Eden. So, but still, the life was going on with a certain stability and serenity, a familiarity between man and nature. There's a harmony between man and nature, even though the earth was cursed, not the Adam, because earth would no longer produce as much as it used to. So Adam has to work hard. That is the judgment and punishment from God. So that punishment is for the whole mankind, but still with some patience, some endurance, with some hard work, still life can go on. But Cain, when he murdered his brother Abel, he shattered this protection. Now the land is totally useless. It refuses to produce any crops, any benefits for Cain. Now Cain is sent away from the presence of God, away further east, and he would be a vagabond and a wanderer, and he cannot anymore attach with the land, which is very essential for the sustenance. So this is a very, very bad state that resulted for Cain because of his murder. So here, murder brings in lots of changes and lots of judgments from God. And we went through few things. We also talked about how Cain introduced the insecurity, deep insecurity that we see within the mankind and the taste for blood. So this is very dangerous thing. And for vengeance, he was hateful and vengeful. He no longer has natural protection. He no longer has a home, either human or geographical. So when God says he no longer has a home, uh, a spiritual home, a stable, good, and a resting home, which is secure, which is blessed with multiple relationships, vertical and horizontal and diagonal, that we find in a joint family home. You have all cousins, brothers, parents, uncles, aunts, and children, grandchildren. It's a beautiful home. So that home is missing for Cain. So he no longer has a home and is condemned to death. So death is hunting him and is going towards death because he is moving away from life of God and God's presence. And we also talked about the mark God places on him and gives some kind of assurance that somebody, if kills, finds and kills Cain, that person would be avenged 7 times. So there's an indirect promise from God, but as with the rest of the promises of God, those who only those who believe the promises of God and those who have right standing with God and those who are with God would actually benefit from the promises of God. But here the Cain is moving away and away from God, so he no longer believes in the promises of God. He goes bad. He goes from bad to worse. If Adam and Eve were in a bad state after their rebellion, Cain is worst stage. So the mark is both real and prophetic, is what guarantees its worth. Cain does not want to believe in it. In fact, he cannot believe in it because he leaves God's presence. He no longer he no longer believes in this God who seems to have condemned him because he had supremely insulted him through murdering his brother. When he murdered his brother, he violated the most fundamental unity and fabric of a family. The home and family he violated in such a supreme way, he insulted the author of the family, that is God. So that's why the benefits of a home and family are now denied for this murderer. He becomes a wanderer and a vagabond. So, this is a spiritual judgment, not that he would not physically find a home. He would eventually find a place and builds a city and names it after his own son. But internally, in his heart and his mind, he doesn't have a spiritual home. That is the fundamental concept. There is a seething insecurity and there is seething fears that are now placed in his heart. So he was always running away from unknown enemy. He was always trying to build walls and fences and build cities in order to satisfy this insecurity within him. And now he wants to protect with his own hands and all the responsibility to protect himself and to provide for himself are now he has to place on his own shoulders because he has no God, because there is no supernatural protection or provision or the the reason for his existence is no longer there because he is no longer with God. See how many blessings we have because we are with God and have right standing with Him. All these things are completely and totally denied to Cain, even though there is a weak thread of promise of God's protection to him. In spite of his grievous sin, God puts a mark, but that doesn't really help him because he no longer believes in it. So continuing, we had one more point last time. Now, Cain will spend his life trying to find security, struggling against hostile forces. So now the world is very hostile to him. Sometimes the hostility is real, the animals and the other men and women and other forces of nature could be hostile and cause him to die. So there are real forces. Sometimes, because he's a murderer, these irrational fears are installed in his heart. Now he is afraid of every small thing, every sound that comes. So it's an imagined hostile forces. So the real and imagined are now he has to confront with. For us who are with right standing with God, we have this inner assurance, inner faith, because God would take care of us. God would provide for us. So this kind of stability and connection with the Almighty, he is missing. He has to do everything for himself. On his own shoulders, he has to place and carry that burden. And the curse on him is really absence of God in his heart and mind. That's really the curse. Taking guarantees, he tries to take guarantees that are within his reach and guarantees that appear to him to be genuine, but which in fact protect him from nothing. So he's fleeing sometimes from nothing, and the solutions and the walls that he builds, he's doing overdoing, and it because his fears are irrational, his solutions are also irrational or futile or illogical. So he's spending his energies and his time on things that are unnecessary. Had he believed God, had he repented and came back to God, all this useless building of walls is not necessary, and he would not be wasting his energies over them. He would be using his energies in right direction, developing holy righteous character, learning all of those good things from God. Now this is all waste of time, waste of life, waste of energies. That's where a man or a woman, when they drift away from God, their life is a kind of leading to death and waste. So that's what happens to Cain. So let's continue, and we will be doing only two verses today, but those two verses are loaded verses, so we are going to spend some good time. And verse 16, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod. Nod means wandering on the east of Eden. So at east of Eden, we have immediately at the foothills of Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve and their uh, third son, Seth, and his descendants are still living at the very vicinity of garden. Even though they are not allowed into the garden, but they are at the very nearness of garden. But Cain is driven east of Eden, farther away from the presence of God. Now, the word nod, N-O-D, most translations use this as a proper noun, as if there is a city called Nod. There is no indication, either archaeologically or historically, that there is any town called Nod. This is just simply means in Hebrew a land of wandering. So here it is my belief, and there are several others also believe that God is figuratively talking about a wandering land into which Cain is condemned. So this is just a spiritual concept. It's not a physical place. And so that's a spiritual concept. So he would be like a homeless person, a destitute person. You can have a huge mansion with all the good things filled in it, but you can still have no purpose for your life in the eyes of God. You have no true stability and no true enjoyment of the relationships of a home and family. You would be a vagabond and a wanderer in the spiritual landscape. So this is spiritual landscape is what Nod probably referring to. Uh, so land of Nod in is land of wandering in Hebrew. Why should it be made a proper name? It's a question asked. Probably we should not make it a proper name. That adds unnecessary confusion to the story. And then here what happens? Cain wants a home, he can have none. Who is forever the man going somewhere? Here, the deeper insecurities and deeper fears within Cain would always put him on run, put him on search for something. He couldn't truly find a resting place and peaceful place and spiritually speaking a home because he is condemned and cursed to be a wanderer. So the meaning is much more spiritual in nature than the physical or material in its application. So wherever he goes, whatever he does, he's a wanderer. He's always going somewhere. He is in search of something and he never finds that something which he searches. He might find a temporary satisfaction and he deludes himself that he found a solution, but pretty soon that solution is not really meeting his need or giving some comfort from his insecurities. Temporarily, it may do, but on long-term basis, all his solutions would fail. So he would be in search of a new solution, a bigger city, a more stronger city. Now he perceives everybody else as enemies, trying to kill him because of this deep insecurity. Largely it is irrational, sometimes it is rational. So you tend to view at other people as your potential enemies. So what would be the natural reaction? You want to subdue them, you want to overpower them, and you also want to overpower animals, especially wild beasts. They might come and kill you. And also you might want to tame the forces of nature, the weather and hurricanes or whatever. You want to control that also so that you feel safe, you feel secure. But he would never reach a point where his deep fears are completely addressed because it is not possible. He has a deeper spiritual condition, a deeper spiritual problem. He tries to find a physical solution to his spiritual problem. That is the struggle of Cain, and that is the struggle of whole mankind who were away from God's face and God's presence. So he's always a wanderer. He's going somewhere. So Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in a land of wandering on the east of Eden. So we are exploring this verse. Uh, and next point, Cain is always searching of a place where his need for security might be satisfied. Remember, now he has insecurity. He asks God, my punishment is too much. And what if somebody finds and kills me? So he has this deeper insecurity that is within himself after he murdered his brother Abel. When you murder somebody, something changes within the heart and mind of that murderer. The violence that he inflicted on one of his family members, now he feels that violence. Somebody might commit to him. So the judgment of God is very carefully measured and calibrated and put it on his head, on the head of a murderer. Continuing, the only place he finds is that very country characterized being uninhabitable. So spiritually, he wants to find a place of rest and place of home, but he cannot find because the Nod is the land of wandering. The land of wandering itself is characterized being uninhabitable. So you can't spiritually have a resting place or a home because The whole spiritual landscape now you are pushed into is uninhabitable. So the deeper longings and deeper satisfactions are out of reach for Cain, even though he wants them. East of Eden. He goes east of Eden. Uh, East has a directional theology. As more you go east, you are moving away from God and away from His presence and His face, and you are moving away from God. That means indirectly you are moving away from life of God and blessings of God, and you are moving towards death, towards emptiness, towards loss of purpose for your existence. That's what happens when you move eastward in a spiritual sense. It is not physical east, it's a spiritual east. East of Eden is a spiritual phrase, yeah, that God uses. Cain is forever fixed at the starting place. His eye and its desire must always wander after the land where he directs his steps. That means he wants a place where he has control and where he has a control over the uncertainty that was introduced as a part of the murder and God's judgment. So he wants to remove some of the uncertainty and want to take things into his hands so that he can kind of satisfy himself that things are not that bad. They are somewhat better and somewhat under his control. But he can never finish his journey, for he lives at the point of departure, that is east. So the east is never ending journey. East is never satisfying place. East is forever into unknowns, forever into non-stop wandering, a restless evil. That's what the East is kind of communicates to us through the pages of Bible. So when he went on east of Eden, that shows lots of directional difficulties for Cain and all his descendants. And what happens when Adam fell? They also moved east from the center of the garden. So Adam's fall resulted in a situation bearable through patience, where Adam's security is assured by natural order. So God cursed the land for Adam because he has to work a lot harder. He has to work through the sweat of his brow to get a small portion of crop. So land is not cooperating, but with hard work, with lots of patience and endurance, he can still survive. Land is still kind of cooperating. The wild animals are not coming and hunting him, and the forces of nature are not totally against him, even though there is a reduction in the cooperation. So the natural order is still helping Adam and Eve and their third son Seth and all their descendants. But Cain is a different story. Cain is a different story. But Cain disturbed this natural order, natural relationship between man and the nature. Cain disturbed it, resulting in absolute insecurity. The absolute insecurity, sometimes it is real and often times it is imagined. Cain's fall, that is, when he fell through the murdering of his brother Abel, it raises his desire for to a higher pitch, that obscure anguish that is planted in his inner recesses. So there is some anguish, some pain, some confusion that are all judgments of God on him, on the murderer, the first murderer. So he has to do something to reduce all these things that are going on within him. He wants to reduce the pain. So now he feels the absolute insecurity and he goes overboard in order to reduce the insecurity. So the natural reaction is you build and raise walls around you. You would overprotect yourself, not because there is real danger out there, because your heart is planted with irrational fears, the deeper insecurities that Cain is now subjected to. So he would be going overboard, and he was looking for a greater solution for his insecurities. So whatever is convincing to his human mind, he would raise the wall, or he will subdue everything that is supposedly against him. Everybody is now enemy to him. That's how he perceives. And everybody wants to kill him at the first opportunity. That's how he thinks. Because he killed at his first opportunity his innocent brother Abel. So see, these things are reversed and poured down on the head of Cain. Now, Cain represents the whole of the mankind, actually. We will come to that later, but the whole Babylon is built with this thinking. Let's continue this verse 16. And Cain's eye and the desire of his eye is turned toward Eden, the lost paradise, where there was eternity and security. So he was knowingly or unknowingly, his desire and his eye, he wants everything that was present in the Eden, Garden of Eden. In Garden of Eden, there was eternity and security. These are two important features. Adam could have lived forever, at least theoretically, at Adam and Eve, because nothing would cause them to die, because they were not yet sinned. So it is kind of a setting. The garden setting is eternity. It's a long life. And also the security. Nobody threatens you. It's a well secured environment. It's a beautiful environment. I have given one presentation in Galveston, Texas, about the Eden, Garden of Eden. If you haven't watched that, please do watch. And that is what he realizes he lost. His father and mother, Adam and Eve, lost it, and he also lost it. Now he wants them both. While he was wandering, these two are taken away. Eternity is taken and security is taken, and he wants them both, but he knows that he was driven towards east and away from it. Now he wants both. He wants both, but he doesn't want to go back to Eden. He cannot go back to Eden. And he, in order to have them in a legitimate way, in an assured and continual way, is only possible when he comes back to God, face to face relationship with God, which he detests, which he hates. So there is no possibility of going back to Eden, going back to God. Now he wants to get these things by his own hands, by his own mind. So we will see that as we that the farther he is from eternity, the more his condition drives him back to it. That means he sees more dangers here and there as he's wandering through the nod, land of wandering. He feels restless and is afraid all the time, and he thinks that he may die anytime. He may get killed anytime. What is the remedy for killing? The eternity, continuation of life, which Adam and Eve enjoyed in the garden. So more he faces dangers, more he desires eternity. He attempts to take permanent leave of his wandering to bring himself closer to the absolute eternity. So he wants to make sure that he continues to live and live long without any fear, without any security, without any violation to his securities, and continued long life. These are the deeper inner needs of him, but he doesn't know how to accomplish right way. So he always chooses a wrong way. But he cannot rid himself of his human condition. Thus, his departure can never be anything but a journey that never reaches its port. It is God's absence which is the never ending sting planted in his heart. So the absence of God, that is his curse. That is the never ending sting that drives him in search of peace, rest, and a home for himself, spiritually speaking. But he would never find because he is in the land of Nod. The land, whole spiritual landscape is land of wandering, a vagabond. Coming face to face with God is the only way to stop this wandering. The search for home, search for Eden, is in the end a constant desire for God's presence. He doesn't even know what he wants. He wants everything that Eden offers. In other words, what God's presence would offer him with abundance of provisions and absolute securities and most fulfilling purpose for his life. He lost it all. But the search appears to be without hope because he doesn't understand his problem very well and he doesn't understand the solution at all, the right solution that is going back to God. Now he finds wrong solutions or his own solutions, which would bring more misery to him. We are told that we are told very precisely that he is to be a wanderer and a vagabond. As such, he can find no rest. There is a verse that tells us there is no rest for the wicked. And when a Proverbs tells us when a man murders is a is a is a murderer and he sheds human blood, then something haunts him rest of his life. The blood of the victim and the memories of the dying uh, Abel, all those things would never leave him. They continue to haunt him. This is the judgment of God. And Proverbs tell us when he runs and haunted spiritually rest of his life. And Proverbs tell us let no man help him because he deserves it, because he took the very life of a human being, which he has no right. See how big a sin it is in God's eyes to take somebody's life. The murder is such a huge sin. It's a deep insult to God who gave this life freely to all human beings. He warned Noah and all his descendants as they begin new journey, new mankind. Noah was like a new Adam, and he warns with one big warning: beware of the blood. Don't shed it. It would never go well for all of you guys. Of course, mankind do not listen to that warning, and the bloodshed is widespread. And so the wanderer and vagabond is initially put on Cain as a first murderer, but But is spreads, this spreads to everybody. The whole mankind is plagued by this uh, by these insecurities, by these fears, by this hopelessness and purposelessness. We see this more as we develop the concept. Even towards the end of this presentation, we would see how these things roll out and they become uh, to very thinking of the fabric of human thinking now in this in our times, what people think and what people pursue and why they do it, we begin to see the deeper insecurities. They always want a home which they cannot find. This is actually Babylon. It's the very beginnings of Babylon. He is therefore condemned to a perpetual searching for God's presence. The, the God with whom he wanted nothing to do. He doesn't want anything to do with God, in whom he does not believe, and in his very condition keeps him from ever finding him. Whatever he does, he cannot succeed. That is the hopelessness of it all. Is it not describing us, the whole mankind, in a broader sense? Except the elect for whom God revealed himself for us. But much of the world is like this. Now he tries something else, something that disturbs his situation and make it even worse. So every solution, every remedy he brings in brings more pain and more sorrow to him. So we will go to the next verse. And he not only went away from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of wandering east of Eden, now he finds a physical city. Verse 17. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, that is his first son. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. The word Enoch means initiation and beginning of utilization. And city is Air. So we'll talk about the city, the the literary meaning of the Hebrew word next presentation. But we would now continue our discussion with this verse 17. What it involves. Knowing his wife and begetting a son and building a city and calling the city by the name of his son. So there are two acts we see, but the two are very interrelated. So here, begetting children has come up with a different purpose, different motive, and different reason. I don't want to offend anybody by saying this. God Himself commanded the mankind, be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply, replenish the whole earth. That's a recurring command from God. Be fruitful and multiply. When God says, beget children, be fruitful and multiply, what he means is you beget more and more children and raise them in the fear of the Lord. Raise them in the fear of the Lord. In fact, the biblical approach is children actually do not belong to you. They are leased to you by God. They belong to God, and you are given a custodianship, a, 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 a kind of uh, parentship to train them and raise them in the fear of the Lord. And then once they become adults, you let go because they belong to God and they would make mistakes and learn from them, and they would take advantage of your training, and they would also make right decisions, and eventually they become adults and they would train their children as long as they are children. But there is no absolute possession of your children. You are not the absolute owner of your children. They are only leased out. I'm sorry if I'm offending that, but when God says, be fruitful and multiply, God is giving awesome responsibility to you as parents, and is also giving you awesome joy to look at your children and grandchildren, as our good friend and brother uh, Chris Dorman has recently visited his grandchildren. So this is all beautiful, awesome. But when you are not with God, when you are away from God, like Cain, your your reasoning and your mind is twisted. You tend to think that your children are your private possessions, and you begin to think that they're extension of yourself. You begin to think that you would live through your children. We see this more. The reason for him to beget children is not the God given reason to be fruitful and multiply, but this is a different reason, different thinking, more evil and more sinister. I mean, what is wrong with building homes and building homes together and form a city? There is nothing wrong with it. But here, the Cain, the reason for building city is different. Is different. He has two things he does in this verse. He begets children, he builds a city, and child's name, he puts it on city. So that is high level what is happening. Let's see some of the hidden things what Cain does. Cain is completely dissatisfied with the security granted to him by God. That is the mark. God puts a mark and gives him an assurance, and he is dissatisfied with it because he can't see the mark, that is invisible mark that God puts on him. He wants visible and tangible and physically satisfying securities and guarantees. So he is completely dissatisfied with the security granted to him by God. So he searches out his own security. See, your own security, your own solutions. It is only when he believes in God that he will be able to believe that the mark placed on him is an effectual guarantee, because it is an integral part of God's word. So when God says it is does, it is good, and it is absolute, that promise is 100% reliable and and can be taken advantage of, because God wouldn't change. There is no changing variation in him. He's same yesterday, today, and forever. His promises stand forever. So that is, but he is not satisfied with the word of God or the promise of God or the mark of security that is put on him. Cain does not understand it the way God does, or God intends. God intends that Cain should have some faith to believe his mark and his promise. See, the faith is essential thing that God requires, and the essential thing that God is well pleased with. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, right? The faith is everywhere. You have to believe, even against all odds, even if the whole physical cries against the promises of God, you should have that strong faith that I would listen to God and his bank on his promises than everybody and everything else that cries out against his promises. That's the faith. Cain does not understand it the way God does or God intends about the mark. And as for his security, he will find another way to procure it. So he wants that security, he wants to procure it another way, because he doesn't want to go in the way of faith. to please God, another way to satisfy his desire for eternity. Because eternity is lost, he is ever living in the danger of getting killed. So his concept of eternity is jeopardized and challenged every time somebody comes near him and he fears for his death. He is about to take wrong road everywhere, every step leads further away from God. So he is moving further east away from God. This road leads to mirages in his heart because it leads to temporary satisfactions of the thirst for the eternity and rest. So he wants it. The whole lust, the way it works is it offers a temporary satisfaction, but it claims and pretends that it would offer a permanent eternal satisfaction. So the whole lust is a big cheating scheme. It's just a temporary. Once you go there and fulfill your desire, and then you will quickly realize it is not going to bring you lasting satisfaction. You are tricked and you are cheated. The whole lusting works. So this is all the mirages that are installed in the heart of Cain as a judgment because he killed, murdered his brother Abel. Now he is all mirages. Mirages in a desert, it appears there is a plenty of water. You are so thirsty because of the desert desert heat. You run towards the water, only find it's all dry sand. There is no water. It was a mirage. So the several mirages seem to be planted in his heart that lead him to run for temporary solutions, but his quest for eternity, to live forever and find rest, a home, is far, far away from him. Cain does two things to make his curse bearable. So now curse is unbearable for any person, for either Adam or Cain. So when you're in the torment of a curse, you want to minimize its effects. You want to reduce this pain. So you would begin to find solutions to minimize this heat and this torment. So he does two things to minimize this unbearableness of curse. He knows his wife sexually, who then gives him a son, and then he builds a city. Two things he does in verse 17. So here we see the reasons for getting son. Uh, the first act is same as Adam's when he was expelled from Eden, the act which had the result of bringing Cain into the world. So when you are under God's curse, God's judgment, you want to reduce its effects. And then there seemed to be why Adam waited for so long until he was kicked out of Eden. Then he suddenly needs sons and daughters. Why not he while he was in garden? That was a question. So something happens to them. They are under judgment of God, and seems to be a pattern that they want to produce children. Why? Because not because God tells them to be fruitful and multiply, but because they want to extend themselves. They want to procure eternity, and in a way they want to live through their children because they are gonna die. They want to extend their life in the realm of flesh. See, there are several things that are going on behind the scenes. So the first act of Cain is same as Adam's when he was expelled from Eden to beget children. The act which had the result of bringing Cain into the world by Adam and Eve, and it is man's desire to find life, eternity again. He lost his life, he lost his eternity, both from the Garden of Eden and even the limited life. Now Cain lost it. Now he wants to live forever. How? He wants to transmit his life to his children. This is a mental workaround. And through this human reasoning, he believes that he can live forever through his children and children's children. I mean, look at God. When you beget children, they are gift from God. And God wants you to raise these children in fear of the Lord for him. Now that is reversed for Cain. He wants children for himself, not to raise them for God. See the fundamental difference? And the second act, the first act is beget children. Second act attempts to satisfy his deepest desires for eternity and security. He satisfies his desire for eternity by procuring children, and then he satisfies his desire for security by creating a place that belongs to him alone, nobody else. So there's a private possession, and he calls it a city. This is at least how God sees his activity, as building a city and creating a place belonging to him, nobody else, so he feels more secure with definite boundaries. See, this kind of thinking would lead you away from God because you don't want God taking care of you, bringing you God's protection surrounding all around. Those who fear Lord have nothing to fear any other thing, because the protections of God would surround them. The angels probably were posted, but Cain's thinking is in the opposite direction. So these two acts have two different accomplishments. Um, the direct relationship between these two acts is revealed in the identity of the name given to the city and to the child. So the two acts, the city he builds and the child he begets, and he names the city after the name of the child. So both are combined to satisfy his deep rooted uh, sinful condition that exists because he murdered. The life and heart of a murderer is unfolded in this verse. The city of Cain is the first place where he can be himself, his homeland, the one settled spot in his wandering. Secondly, it is a material sign of his security. Physically, materially, in realm of flesh, he finds his security because he sees perhaps a boundary wall, a raised wall, or a secure home or homes protecting against wind, against rains, against wild animals, against predatory animals and men. Whatever he is afraid of, now he has some temporary material physical evidence that he is now secure. Cain sought security not so much from God, but from the world hostile since Abel's murder. So the hostile world, it is how he perceives. So the hostility could be real sometimes, but most of the times it is imagined fear. Continuing verse 17, the world was different after Adam's fall, but it was not yet marked by murder. When Adam and Eve were expelled, the world itself was difficult to live in, but it's not that bad. But now it is, because the city is direct consequence of Cain's murderous act and his refusal to accept God's protection. So the murder changes something in the heart of Cain. He detests God. He doesn't want to be with God. And he doesn't want anything from God. He doesn't accept anything from God. So he's on his own. That spirit of rebellion and revolt, that is a consequence of a murder, and that consequence gives rise to another consequence, that is the city, the building of a city. The building of a city is rooted in all these motivations. Cain builds a city. For God's Eden, he substitutes his own. Now we begin to see there's a city, the garden city, Eden. Now he can't go back to it, but now in his with his own strength, with his own mind, he finds a solution. He tries to reduce the torment because of the curses and the judgments of God, and he builds a city. For God's Eden, he substitutes with his own city. And for the goal given to his life by God, he substitutes a goal chosen by himself, just as he substituted his own security for God's security. So here we see the beginning of the civilization. Cain takes his destiny on his own shoulders, refusing the hand of God in his life. Is it not what we are seeing? The whole technology, science, and the whole civilization, and the advancement that we are seeing in the world, and the whole Babylon we begin to see when we study Cain and his city. The city is called Enoch, means initiation or dedication. He inaugurates as opposed to God's creation. He initiates as opposed to the garden, a city opposed to Eden. He gave this name to his creation, now going to make the world again. So he is creating a world after his own imaginations, matching his own desires to suit his thinking, and to serve him basically. So he begins this kind of initiation. That's what Enoch means. Enoch means initiate and dedicate and make a new beginning and a new creation after your own. When you are doing that, it's all in your mind that you are trying to accomplish. And then practically, physically also, you would do wondrous things. The massive cities of Los Angeles, New York, the massive skyscrapers, that is the physical evidence, the physical things that he produces, but it is a response to the deeper inner emotions that are within the man. We begin to see this. All these things and plus much more they could have gotten in the Garden of Eden when they have right standing with God. So this is all you want to accomplish the Garden of Eden, both its eternity and the security by your own means by building a city. It's kind of physical in the physical cities, but largely it's a spiritual city that God is referring to. Since perfection and God are excluded from his unsatisfying world that he is creating now, he introduces all possible pains. For Cain's eyes, it is a beginning. God's creation is seen as nothing. God did nothing, and in no case did he finish anything. So, God is abundant, and the fundamental knowledge that God created everything, and God finished man, and God finished garden, and he said everything is beautiful and good. All those foundational truths are now fully forsaken. God is out of picture for this city building. Are we seeing this? Cain finds a solution for his situation, but the real solution is in God's hands. That is what he could absolutely not tolerate. He wouldn't tolerate God, so the solution is with God. So he wouldn't find true solution. He wants to find alone the remedy for situation he himself created. All this mess he created because of the murdering his own brother. Now he can't remedy that situation in an absolute sense, which he cannot himself repair because it is a situation dependent on God's grace. This is the only solution. God's grace, in other words, Jesus Christ has to arrive and begin a solution for every man, every woman. But that is going ahead myself too far. But Cain accumulates remedies after remedy. He accumulates remedies, each one a new disobedience, each remedy a new offense to God. Each remedy sinks him even deeper in a woe, into a situation even more inextricable. Inextricable. He cannot come out of the the quicksand that he's creating. He's sinking deep and deep into it. Cain begins in this way of thinking when he builds city and names it after his children. He reduces God to a hypothesis, to the domain of superfluous and the unreal. God is no longer real, is a hypothesis. Some people believe. Is it not the dominant thinking pattern of the majority of mankind? Just as history begins with the murder of Abel, since before death there is no way for us to learn man's history, and the death that resulted in the fall, first man manifested, first in the fall first manifested itself as a murder. So the civilization begins with the city and all it represents. So man has fallen, Adam and Eve have fallen, and then Cain has fallen further. And Cain's fall is a result of murder, murdering his own brother. And he goes farther and farther away. And every remedy and every situation, every solution he finds sinks him deeper and farther away from God, farther away from real solution. And there is no hope, there is no U-turn for him until the new covenant and new gospel perhaps reaches Cain. But he continues. Cain and Cain's descendants will continue, and this city and the civilization have begun. These are the these are the origins and roots of what we call, or what Bible calls it, Babylon. So here we see the Babylon. Its foundations are independence from God. It's a rebellion and revolt against God. It is also a result of the curse that is placed on them. It is also as a result of long list of judgments from God. So it is one of a bad state of existence and no hope, no purpose, and doing vain things and trying to find mirage solutions, only to be found that these solutions are not real solutions, and you keep on finding and seeking for new solutions. This is never ending wandering, and truly all man and woman are vagabonds in a spiritual sense, but we falsely call it a city and civilization. We we give a positive description to that, but Bible wouldn't mince words. This is the city and civilization in revolt against God and all his blessings, and the life forevermore is totally cut off. And we will continue to develop this in future presentations. But now I will end this. Uh, Thank you for watching, and we will thank you for your attention, and we will open the room for your insight and your comments. Chris, go ahead, please.
Sure. First, thanks for the study. I missed the last couple. I'm going to have to go back and look and watch them. But the study of Enoch and the city, pretty interesting. I know Enoch and Cain have a lot of symbology, throughout the Bible. I think there's at least four references in the New Testament to, Cain, tied to lack of faith, evil, separation from God. I'll have to look up those references, but it seems that it just started at the very beginning, right? Now that I'm looking at it, it seems like that trend was established right away with Cain, the first son. But the question came to mind is, has anybody ever tried to figure out what the mark was? Because it seems interesting. It seems like it was something obvious, but you know, I've heard lots of supposition and discussion on it, and I have my own opinion. But what do you think the mark was? Was it something visible, do you think?
I believe it's a figurative way, perhaps a spiritual mark. It's a kind of an assurance. It's a weak assurance, a weak promise from man's perspective, because he's not giving any physical evidence for it. Um, he says, I have put a mark on you, which you can't see. What do you do about that? That's really tough. You have to believe. See, the whole this 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 is a very strange promise God gives him. Uh, it demands a lot more faith actually to reap the benefits of that uh, mark. And the way God uh, articulates this mark is, if somebody kills you, then that person would be avenged 7 times. So look at how Cain would hear and interpret uh, that promise from God. Okay, this God now is saying, if I am killed, then I would be avenged 7 times. So what is the use for me? I was already killed, right? Then what happened? I don't care if I was avenged 1 time, 2 times, or 7 times. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make helps me to convince that it is even a promise of life. I don't see it at all as a promise of protection. This is how Cain thinks. But if you think about that, look at the intent. Even though God literally says, after you were killed, you will be avenged. But in between the lines, even if we spend time thinking about the whole context and the way God said it, hey, I'm going to give you some protection. That's what God is conveying. But that really requires for you to study and meditate on what God said. Last presentation, we discussed about that. We have to meditate on God's promise, each of the promises, in order to deeply understand and begin to believe and reap the benefits, which Cain, I think, totally missed it. Since he can't understand, he cannot believe. Since he doesn't believe, he doesn't want it. And since he doesn't have any such promises from God, now he has to invent his own security, his own provisions. So he goes in his custom solutions. So That's what I believe. Had it been a physical mark, like say some Hollywood movies put a mark on his forehead, some blah blah blah, then he is full assured that he is carrying a mark. If it is invisible, it really demands faith. You have to, I think that's my understanding. If somebody else have other understanding, or even yourself, Chris, I like to listen what you think, what others think about this mark. I'm done.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. There had to be, something that impacted his confidence and, but it was a clear message to people to leave him alone, that perhaps they would be cursed as he is cursed. But I also think that, maybe there was some physical thing, that God gave as, a symbol. I've seen, I've seen references to the effect that perhaps it was leprosy or something like that that would cause people to shy away. You don't touch, I don't want to touch that guy. I don't want to get it. Maybe it was the first episode of leprosy, recorded. There's no substance for any of that guesswork, but I just, I wondered because otherwise, he would have had, the same level of arrogance and confidence leaving that situation, to go and live his life. He was dead set on being separated from God, and there's a reference in the New Testament that says that he had no faith, whereas Seth had faith, Cain did not. So he was already predetermined to have no confidence or any relationship with God at that point. Um, I think that reference is in Hebrews. Trying to find it. Uh, Hebrews 11:4. It just contrasts Cain and Abel. Abel's sacrifice was more excellent because it was offered by faith. The implication is that Cain's was not. He had no confidence. He had, you know, absolutely no relationship with God at that point. Uh, but anyway, as to the mark, it's just pure guesswork at this point. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Any other any other comments, insights, and questions? Yes, Guyleen, go ahead, please.
Uh, Thank you for the refreshing Cain story because I just thought about Cain and Abel yesterday, but very shallow. I mean, it was just the jealousy portion. Any case, about the mark, uh, I would um in Indian and my background, or because I'm with people who still believe in spirits around, and in our belief system, that's not culturally, but not as Christians, we still know that some people have, they call the third eye, or their spiritual eye is open. They can see demons, they can see angels, they can see dwarfs, they can see a lot of um, elementals we cannot see. So there is a possibility that in the other areas or other peoples, um, because they have the spirit world um, roaming around, and they some have the third eye, so they would be the witches or the warlocks or the head, the spiritual leader side of a group. Then possibly they will say, oh, we cannot touch him. There's something on him that is taboo, or we is dangerous for us. It's the same like in Nigeria. I think it was Nigeria. The bishop there came over to here, and he was saying about how Christians are covered by the blood of Jesus, or a ring of fire, a wall of fire covers the church. And a recent one, which was very interesting for me, was they couldn't enter or curse a place or a home, especially if they had um, communion or the Passover weekly in their homes. So that was an eye opener for me that um, this was a story I got from not live but video on the doing the communion weekly on Shabbat or Erev Shabbat has the renewal of the covenant, because we keep renewing the covenant and reminding us as a family, as a group, that we are Christ, our and the witches, the other cursing people who want to harm us is cannot um, go against. They also have the warnings, and so this is a good realization for us to be ever so vigilant about having Christ in us, with us, and then also doing the Lord's Supper of renewing the covenant weekly. So thank you.
Thanks, Gailen. Thanks, Chris. You posted that Jude 1:11. Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Kor, that is Korah. So there's a way of Cain.
Well, and it kind of touches on what Guy Lee was saying there too. Perhaps there was much more to, the story with Cain than, we're given in that brief story in Genesis. And it kind of comes out here a little bit in Jude. I don't know exactly how deep or prevalent that was, but I think he was totally, already evil.
Yeah, you're right. It's such an exceeding evil. It contaminated. Like little leaven leavens the whole lump. So that evil spread so much from his city to other cities, other people, and that made a case for the flood from God, judgment of flood. So there's a strong connection. There's a violence, unchecked violence, and then continually evil.
It's interesting also that one of his great great grandsons, Lamech, I don't know if this is going to come out in your study a little bit later. Uh, Tell me if it is, but Lamech also murdered somebody and bragged about it. And
Correct.
in that story, he says something about 70 times 7, the 70 times 7 prophecy, which shows up, you know, much
Yeah.
later in
Yeah.
Christ's story. So I, I thought that was kind of an interesting add.
Yeah. I was not planning to cover him, uh, but that's an interesting reference. It is not God telling, He himself tells. But then obviously Jesus comes, you have to forgive 7 times 70 to Peter. So 7 times 70 we find at strangest places in Bible. We also find it in Daniel. Any other comments, insights? Tom, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Tagore. I was looking up that um, same thing here, trying to find some information about the mark, and all I can find is that they claim it had to be visible because there would be others really had to recognize that there was a warning not to kill Cain, and possibly a legal or covenantal sign. There's God gave signs that like the rainbow, he wouldn't bring a flood on the land again, a complete flood, or there was blood on the doorposts and things like that. There might be some kind of a mark of some kind that would keep him from being uh, attacked. And I don't know, but that's all I could find as far as what they suggested in various different
Yeah, that's
books.
completely possible, Tom. God does not, I mean, scriptures do not specifically say whether the mark was physical or spiritual. I am going in the direction that it is probably spiritual, but you can definitely make a case that it is physical. Then why Cain failed to take advantage of it is also another mystery then.
Yeah, that's true. But it would seem like, well, there's got to be somebody walking around, but I guess the message had to be given out somehow that you don't kill people.
Oh
And
yeah,
I'm not sure how that
absolutely.
was done.
Yeah, that would also include abortions.
Yeah, little things like
God
that.
hates these things. Uh, the hands that shed innocent blood, either feet that run to shed innocent blood. So that shedding innocent blood is more literally fulfilled in abortions, right?
Hmm. Certainly, most certainly.
Yeah. Thanks for the uh, insight explanation into the that mark. It could be physical also because scripture is silent. Uh, Chris also put something in chat. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he, being dead, speaketh, yet speaks. Interesting verse.
Yeah, it was an example to everyone.
Yeah,
Spoke loudly.
yeah, envy, jealousy, those two. There's actually spirit of murder. It resulted in murder, but the root is envy and jealousy both. When you envy somebody, what you are really saying is, I wish that this person would disappear. How that person should disappear? He should cease to exist so that his he would no longer torments me because of my envy. So if the envy is fed, spirit of envy is fed, it grows and becomes spirit of murder, both envy and jealousy. So that's what plagued Cain.
Well, I think it's also the same jealousy that was present in Christ's time, in the chief priests and the Jews. That's why they killed him. But it's the very same thing.
Yeah,
Cain
even
was
Pilate.
jealous of God.
Yeah, Pilate could
So,
see that. See, the Gentile could see that. Out of envy, they handed him over. He knew that. How? That's why he
yeah,
wanted to release Jesus. I mean, don't underestimate the envy and jealousy. It's they're more dangerous things than people realize. As New Testament, New Covenant Christians, we should all the more be focused in cleaning the cup inside. We should really work hard not to harbor those envy, murder, jealousy. All these things are placed in the list of defilements. Yeah, this
right.
Tom, go ahead, please.
I just think it's interesting that whatever whatever Christ did, their only solution was always to kill him. It was just like they weren't like, let's put him in prison or do something here. Let's, make him disappear or something. But no, they always said, well, let's figure out how to kill him. There's no other solution to him.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. They don't want him to be sent to prison either. They just want to get rid of him. That's real. It was fed so much, their envy. It has become pure spirit of murder. They would
But you,
not want to settle for anything less than death and death on cross. So they have set up false witnesses, even though their witnesses did not agree. They forced Pilate to pass a judgment to fulfill their wishes. They asked for Barabbas and asked for Christ to be crucified.
yeah, and in Christ's example, one of the takeaways I get is that he made them look bad. He made them look bad to the people because they were worried about, their image. He made them look bad to the Romans, like they were ineffective. And I'm not even sure what that is because it's kind of the same thing that Cain exhibited. He was mad with his brother because he made Cain look bad to God. So, what is that element that, we're all seeking God's approval, maybe, and Cain just clearly didn't get the concept. It wasn't possible. So he had already, not done the thing, and Abel made him look bad. And it appears to be the same thing that Jesus Christ did with the chief priests and the Jews and the Sadducees and even the Sanhedrin. They all looked bad and totally ineffective because they couldn't do any of the things that he did. So I'm trying to explore, it's called jealousy, but what is that? Because they're all striving for the very same thing, to please God and to be on the inside track, right? To be the ones that are chosen and have the power. and the recognition. I don't know. I think maybe that's even Satan's sin. The very same thing. Not that I want to explore it that much, but it seems to be
Yeah.
similar.
Some people uh, explain envy, jealousy as an expression of covetousness also. Something they desire it for themselves, which is not happening, but this is happening to somebody else. So they have double torment. But what is the solution if somebody is envious of you? What can you do? What should you do?
I don't think we have to do anything about somebody being envious of us. That's not our, in my opinion, our responsibility. I'd be more worried about me being jealous or envious of somebody else, and then what do I do about it? That's in my realm. That's on me, right? But again, I think you're right. It comes down to wanting or desiring something that God gave to somebody else. It comes back to my observation is that He gave us what He gave us. We should be satisfied with what He's given us. If He wants to give us more, because everything's His, then He will. And that's tough sometimes.
Yeah, you're right. We should be worrying about our envyings than somebody is envying of us. That's logical and practical. That's right. Let's go to Jenny and Brian.
I was gonna say that when I encounter people that get jealous of me, what I do is I remind them of the things that they have that I don't have, and that for them to look at it, that it's like, you shouldn't be jealous of me because look at the things that you have that I don't have that I do desire. Like back when I was still single and I didn't have family, I had a cousin that told me, "Oh, you think you're so great now because you own this big, nice house." And I'm like, I have no clue where that came from because I didn't even know that he knew I had a house. So my response to him was, well, you have a family, you have a beautiful wife, you got beautiful children. I'm like, I don't have those things that you have. I said, so look at what you have compared. I just have a house. I don't have a family like you do that loves you. And then when he heard me say that, it rang a bell in his head. He's like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. I do have a beautiful family that I love." And it just completely changed his demeanor towards me. So I think sometimes it's okay to remind people that, there are other things that you have that you don't need to be envious of because maybe someone else wants the same thing that you have, but they don't have, you know? So it's all relative.
So were you largely successful in defusing the envy?
Yes. Because I was like, whoa, it came out of left field, you know? I mean, this was a cousin I probably hadn't seen in 10 years, and it was because of a funeral that brought all of the relatives together. And I think he was a little drunk when he said all these things, so I don't know who he heard this stuff from. But yeah, then things got better, and I just asked him, how old are his kids and what are they doing now? So things got better afterwards. But I think sometimes people forget what they have and they just look outwards. Like I have a friend that I constantly have to remind her, stop looking at what others have because you should be thankful for what you have. You have a home, you have a job. There are people that don't even have things like that. Like the very basic, you have food. People don't have food sometimes.
Yeah, I think mostly it is irrational. Sometimes you can convince them if their envy and jealousy has some logic. Sometimes there is no logic. They might be far better off than you.
That's true. See that I have seen that as well. You just don't know what somebody's battling with and what they may have. What is it? The materialistic things that they have is just to cover up what they don't have.
Yeah. It's a complex spiritual emotion. Sometimes it's just praise of men. If somebody is praised, you're pissed off. And somebody was given more attention, more respect and honor than you. Those things really would upset.
That would be pride.
Yeah, that was the other thing that Christ had against the rulers of the temple was that they were always seeking recognition and the better seats in the feasts, et cetera, to be praised by men. But that reminds me of the parable of the rich young ruler. That just popped into my head about, again, I think I was talking with Patrick earlier this week about this story. And what comes to me is that the rich young ruler, claims that he's been obedient since he was a young man. And he's asking Christ, what more do I do? What do I still lack? And Christ's response is, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come follow me. It doesn't say he had to give all of his stuff away, just give to the poor. But he went away sad because he was rich, and that would have been impossible or almost impossible. So again, more focus on the materialistic things and not the kingdom of heaven. And that's the pivot point, I think, or the trade-off. You lose your life and you gain it, or you gain your physical life and lose your spiritual life. It's a trade-off. So it's a kind of a similar topic or idea.
Any other comments, insights into this subject of Cain, city of Cain, what we discussed tonight? By the way, what is the difference between envy and jealousy? Envy is mostly described as the things others have which you do not have, so you're envious of them. Jealousy is the things that you have, but somebody else claims them. Jealousy of a husband. So jealousy is you you actually have things in your possession, but anybody knows the finer difference? I haven't studied the Greek definition difference, but at least English. Tom, go ahead, please.
Well, it says here, let's see. Simple definitions. Envy. I want what you have. So you're concerned about lacking something. You're directed toward another person's advantage that you don't have. That can exist even when there's no relationship that's being threatened. So that's I want what you have. Jealousy is I'm afraid of losing what I have. It's really concerned with protecting what is already yours. It might involve a relationship. It could be triggered by some threat or rivalry of some kind or an intrusion. And see, side-by-side comparison would give the aspect envy and jealousy. If the core emotion for envy is discontent, while jealousy is actually fear. And envy wouldn't really require a relationship, whereas jealousy would. Anyhow, that's a little bit of thoughts on it. Oh, here's something. In Genesis 4, Cain envied Abel's accepted offering. In Proverbs 14:30, it says, envy makes the bones rot. Sort of like an internal decay, a slow corruption. Envy is often portrayed as silent, inward, and corrosive, while jealousy in Scripture is Exodus 25, where God describes himself as a jealous God. Then 2 Corinthians 11:2, I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. So jealousy can be sinful if it's possessive, suspicious, controlling, or it can be actually righteous if it's a protective love, where it guards a covenant faithfulness. But so envy is never portrayed as positive, but jealousy can be righteous or sinful. That's all.
Thank you, Tom. Insightful. Adding good understanding. And here Patrick wrote in the chat room, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. All else would be added. Yeah, that's a good verse, Patrick. So if you focus on these two things, other things would be added. All the good things would be added from behind. You don't know how they are added. After many, many years of seeking his kingdom and his righteousness, you did not lack anything. So it's again a test of faith. And then Chris wrote something interesting. Jealousy is khana or zealous. In Bible, jealousy is rooted in the idea of zeal or heat. Hebrew khana, to be intensely red inflamed, and Greek zealous, from which we get zeal or boiling. Envy is pathanas. Envy is technically more diabolical than jealousy because it contains no element of love or protection. So it is a pure resentment that someone else is blessed. So envy is more evil than jealousy. Greek pathanas used exclusively in a negative sense. That is envy. Thanks, Chris. And again, Patrick wrote, a concept is the funnel concept. As you acquire all the things, where do you direct them? To yourself or to others? Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Funnel, the way funnel is shaped, all you acquire to yourself, to your glory, and direct them, or you share with others. That's a good way of overcoming envy and jealousy, both. Yeah, when Jesus asks us to cleanse inside of the cup, we should all be putting efforts not to be envious, not to be jealous, not to be covetous, not to be fools, not to have evil eye, all the defilement lists. We should all be simultaneously putting efforts, at least recognize them, that they need to be worked on. Yeah, Chris says a choice. Yes, good ad, Patrick. So that's a choice. There's also choice to be envious, not or not to be envious. When I worked for corporate America, they suddenly started a policy of promoting women and only women. So all the girls that are much younger, just recently joined in a couple of years, they were all promoted. And here I'm working day and night. I'm at the same position and I felt very bad. And then I reasoned through why am I? And I should rather believe what God says. This is all going away. All the physical, all the flesh is going away. And your higher calling is to wash inside of the cup. So better focus on those things. And then I was at more peace with myself and with God. And then God blessed in such a way I did not lack anything, even without promotion, without pay rise or bonuses. Still, God blesses in mysterious ways, and you have food, clothes, shelter, and all the things that you need. So that verse that Patrick quoted, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. His righteousness is free of envy, jealousy. That works when we seek those things. Jenny Bryan said, I think envy, jealousy is also influence of a spirit. Absolutely. They stir up all these dirty emotions within us. Tom writes, now God can give you your next promotion. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And if you take a step back and look how the promotion helped them actually, other than telling everybody that they are promoted, actually they would put to lot more labor and enslavement, and corporation demands all of their time, all of their energies because they were promoted. And pretty soon, if you work like that, your body develops all kinds of illnesses, and your family reaches a breakdown because you are not having that quality relationship or time. So the promotion, not getting promotion, sometimes a good thing that can happen to a person. You work 9 to 5 and you are done.